My name is Amy Reams. I'm Sales Director of Alliances. Really excited to have you all here. We're here to talk about a hot topic, something that's probably on all of your minds for the marketers in the room today, as well as in your pockets or your hands. We're here to talk about mobile. So before we jump into it, I'm going to let my guests here introduce themselves, name, role, company you're working with. Go ahead. We'll start with Mouse.
Hello everyone, I'm Miles Klieger. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Appboy, based here in New York. And as you heard Stephen and David mention earlier, we're kicking off a new partnership with Sell-Through, which we're very excited about. We focus on mobile marketing automation, lifecycle marketing for mobile-centric marketers, and we're very excited about the partnership and all the great things we're going to do together.
Michael Katz, I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders at mParticle. So we are a customer data platform built specifically for native apps, and partnered with a few folks here, guys over at Appboy, Sell-Through as well. And essentially what we do is we make it easier for mobile marketers to work with the ecosystem of tools that they require in order to run their business, while passing along the lengthy, complex, risky SDK integrations.
Hey guys, Ryan Bonavicino. I am an advisor at Alisonati, former CMO and head of digital. I was there for about 5 years and recently transitioned my role to advise the company through the end of the year as well as 2016. We're a multi-channel retailer. We're in sort of the $300 to $400 million range in terms of guidance for this year. We have about 45 brick-and-mortar stores, a couple thousand wholesale partnerships, and a very massive e-commerce business, which represents close to a quarter of total revenue. And we're clients of longtime clients of Sell-Through and recent clients of Appboy.
Gartner actually just released a forecast in early 2015 that stated by 2017, 50% of the online shopping revenue in the US will come through mobile. Right now that stat's only at 25%, so I'm curious to get your opinion first and foremost about what will count for that jump from 25 to 50 in the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at a high level, you look at where consumers are spending their time. There's never been a more persistent means of communication, a more persistent device than the mobile phone, right? You may sit in front of your TV for a couple hours. You may read the newspaper from time to time. Your phone is in your hand probably 80% of your waking hours. So that's kind of where it starts. A lot of the growth that we will see in mobile, especially with e-commerce, really centers around the fact that you can create an awesome transactional experience, specifically within apps, right? The fact that once you have registered for the app, you can get through the app, into the app through the purchase funnel in a matter of minutes. You don't have to re-enter your credit card information every time. You don't have to log in every time. Things like Apple Touch and Apple Pay make it completely seamless. So just kind of staying core to where users are spending a lot of their time. That's ultimately going to be what drives this.
Great. And Ryan, I mean, you guys just launched your app. Is that something you guys are using in terms of Apple Pay, one-click checkout, things like that, in order to make that commerce experience seamless?
So we have Apple Pay in final consideration for what we'll call phase 2.
Okay.
I think it's important, not just because of the the incremental lift that we'd see on transactions and traffic and adoption, but my most important thing is the relationship with Apple. So when Apple looks to prioritize those partners that they're going to feature, right? So either it's an algorithm that determines who's featured in the App Store, or it's an algorithm plus some sort of magic behind the scenes outside of all the girls wearing our product at the App Store in California. But I think it's important that we align our roadmaps together. So Apple Pay will be prominently front and center. The challenges, however, are integration with legacy point-of-sale systems, which is what a lot of retailers struggle with. So I think that the digital piece of it's pretty straightforward. I think there's a lot of retailers that are adopting at record speed, but there's always going to be hangups. And ironically, there's going to be this sort of arbitrage, I'll call it, that small to mid-sized retailers can take advantage of waiting for, the bigger retailers that have, hundreds of systems that they have to integrate and go through compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley in some cases, all sorts of, issues with public companies. Those are gonna hold the big boys up. So there's definitely an opportunity on the table.
Got it. And with some of those restrictions, do you think Gardner's right? Do you think we will be able to close that gap to get up to 50% of purchases through mobile?
I think we'll close it, and at the same time, we're going to close it in terms of credit that we're applying. So the transactions, a lot of these will be assistive in nature. So we'll be able to assign, fractional contribution of a mobile touch relative to an in-store sale. So when you remove that traffic, all of a sudden, your conversion per user, as it relates to a holistic user, 360, those data points will match up.
Great. So that's commerce, right? I mean, we definitely, I think you were able to touch upon that point of how we're going to see success in commerce, but for publishers it's different. I know we have a lot of publishers in the audience, so Miles, I'll direct this question to you. So specifically for publishers, right now 39% get more traffic from mobile devices than desktop, and only 20% get mobile visitors to spend more time on their mobile site than their desktop site. So really, I think the big question here is what are the critical opportunities for publishers when it comes to mobile that are being missed right now that they should take advantage of in 2016 and beyond?
Yeah, and it's a very interesting time for publishers, certainly in mobile, and I think the kind of big gorilla out there is also the ad blocking, iOS 9, what that's going to mean for publishers specifically going forward, and then you have a school of thought that's saying this is a huge opportunity for native advertising formats, and then there's other schools of thought that are saying that native advertising might be blocked as well. So it's actually a very interesting time. I think for publishers at the end of the day, it really comes down to a couple things. I mean, first of all, it shouldn't necessarily think about mobile as apps versus mobile web versus desktop web. I think you need to think about kind of an ecosystem of creating content and experiences that are going to be appropriate or relevant for your audience and ultimately your advertisers as well. And then trying to understand what's the right channel for the right content in the right format, and how do I deliver that to my users or anticipate their needs. So I think the publishers that are going to be most successful are thinking about it in a more holistic way. And time spent may or may not be actually the most important metric at the end of the day. It's, there's going to be lots of different ways to monetize. So I think there's going to have to be, the industry might need to come together as well and start to look at the classic metrics around time spent or number of sessions or number of pages served or ads served may not necessarily directly correlate to long-term commercial success going forward in a mobile-first world. So I think there's a lot of big questions. There's huge opportunities, but also obviously huge challenges that come with that. So.
Got it. To that point about mobile web versus mobile apps, to all three of you, is there ever a specific reason or opportunity where you guys believe it makes sense not to invest in a mobile app, right? Just to invest in mobile web, whether that be for publishers or for e-commerce?
I think yeah, definitely. I think certainly for certain categories like CPG, for instance, you might have a really hard time explaining to someone why they should spend the time and resources and energy to build a really big, robust app experience for like Doritos or something like that. You can usually create mobile websites much faster. There's less friction for getting people into the experience. If your goal is around creating an authentic engagement and encouraging a social share, for instance, you may not need to go through those extra hoops or steps of getting them inside an app. For other companies, again, I go back to this notion of it's an ecosystem. There's the customer journey. So we work with some streaming music services, for instance, where the mobile web to them is actually an acquisition channel. And when they get people going to the mobile web, they experiment with lots of different approaches to then drive them to do an app install as quickly as possible, because they're finding that their app users are more engaged, they're spending more time, they're able to monetize them better. But it really kind of depends on the business. So I think it's, in certain cases, lower barriers to entry with the mobile web. You might not need to manage a relationship with users in the same way as you would through an app. In other cases, again, you're using mobile web to feed into it. It really just depends on your business and your goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately depends on if you want to own an audience or rent an audience. And I think the points that you make around CPG and even automotive, to a large extent, they don't necessarily need to own an audience in mobile, which is really what apps get you. It's all about user experience. I think I saw it was this past week, it was an interesting post that basically said that apps are for getting stuff done and mobile web is for reading about stuff. So when you think about, like, even going back to the last question and looking at, like, well, where's time being spent for publishers? Is it still desktop or is it mobile? Like, what's a better experience for the users? And I guess if you can't create kind of a meaningful and differentiated experience for your users, then yeah, I don't think that it probably makes sense for a lot of folks to invest in app experiences, and you probably can extend your desktop experience to a smaller screen. But you know, we've had a number of conversations, even with folks in market on the automotive and CPG side, and you know, I think like what they defer back to is kind of that first point I made, which is like, what, even if they were to create a meaningful and differentiated experience for their users, what's the value for them? Is there a significant difference to being able to consistently access these users versus just running ads and, you know, renting access?
I agree with that, and I also think this too, just like everything else in mobile, is an evolving story, because pretty soon Chrome is going to be launching notification capabilities. You can now do a lot of the same thing from a marketing standpoint in a mobile browser that you could do inside a mobile app. So if you can get someone to opt in for Chrome notifications without having them go through the process of having to install your app, or worse yet, have to pay a lot of money to get people to install that app, which is another, you know, big factor that's going on in the industry now. You may be able to gain a lot of the value of mobile apps without having to incur all of the cost and resource requirements associated with building and then maintaining them.
Yeah, couldn't agree more from the e-commerce standpoint. You know, experience should drive everything. Your, you know, the analysis that you have to do on, you know, this exchange of data, these data points. Can you get the same thing? Can you accomplish the same KPIs? Can you add to the pool without having to reinvest or invest again, or invest in a broken mobile strategy? And we find that there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of people that just say, you know what? Let's have the banner pop up on top. Let's direct people to the shopping version of our mobile web experience within an app. And speaking from someone who's in a team that's vetoed, you know, maybe a dozen mobile projects over the years, you know, we did sit on the sidelines because we wanted to do it the right way. You know, I think a lot of that comes down to, you know, having enough content. So another reason to not do a mobile app is because you simply don't have the content and resources. You know, it's ultimately a blend of commerce and utility. You know, does it provide a potential customer, an opportunity to jump in every day and do something other than shop? And we have that as a company. You know, we were built on you know, this idea of individual meaning-based products and stories. So you know, it was easy to get it done after we committed to strategy. But you know, every other idea along the way was, hey, it's just, you know, something that we can put up and convert users at a better rate. You know, does it make sense to, you know, take a year-long you know, look at it and look at mistakes other people are making? Like if we all download, you know, a big retailer's app right now in this room, and we get together, you know, again a year from now, we'll probably all have the exact same experience, like a department store, for example. So personalization and the ability to integrate into what you're already investing in on your desktop experience or in your marketing tools, I think that's sort of you know, that's the incremental,
Right.
truly incremental piece to the pie.
Right, and you mentioned relevancy there, which I definitely want to get back to, as well as data, so lots of points in that. But just to round out that question, I mean, it sounds like the three of you are saying, you know, sometimes there isn't an opportunity to build an app. You shouldn't unless you can create a more unique experience, right? We all know we have limited real estate on our phones. Yes, we'll download Amazon because we're using it on a daily, weekly basis, but you know, we might not be using that department store app on a daily, weekly basis. And I'm curious, and I'm sure the audience is wondering, you know, what are good examples, whether it's publishing or commerce, where people, you didn't think there'd be that differentiator, but they made the leap, they created that app. You know, for me personally, I'm thinking of a sales client, Everlane. They did a really good example. They have a very low inventory, actually, not that many products, but they created a unique experience. They brought mobile-esque qualities that I'm used to with Uber and Amazon, like on demand, 1 hour delivery, I think they do now in San Francisco, maybe in New York. That's a unique experience, right? So it wasn't your typical business that you're going to be looking at every day, but they gave you that incentive to download the app. So I'm curious from the three of you, and can't say Alex Nani on this one, I'm not going to let you get off that easy. What's an example of a customer you've seen or just a business that you interact with daily that's driven that experience home through an app? Miles, let's go. Yeah. Okay. Shoes and all there. Yeah, you got it.
Wow. There's a lot of different ways we can go, but I think kind of continuing with this theme of how do you think through the customer journey and how do you add value in each channel in a way. And this, actually, Michael and I were talking a little bit about this before we came up here. There's a lot of similarities to kind of the beginnings of social media and beginnings of kind of where mobile is today. And early on, it was, do I need a Facebook page as a retailer? I'm not really transacting with them there. Does it make sense? Do I have anything to say? Like, there's a lot of the same types of themes that I think people are trying to answer, or same types of questions, I should say. But to come back to your core question, I look at something like Domino's Pizza, actually, is a good example, because they obviously have had, this is a franchise model, they have thousands of pizza stores all across the country, around the world. They've been selling pizzas through phones and people walking into stores for decades. And then the internet came around, I don't know, however many years ago, they launched Domino's.com, and it became a huge channel for them. I think they do more sales through .com than they do through all their franchises combined. They started to offer more personalized experiences. They remembered your preferences around mushrooms and anchovies. I hate anchovies, but I'll throw that out there. But they made it easier for you to order. And then a couple years ago, they introduced the notion of the pizza tracker, where you could see kind of where in the pizza making and delivery process your pie was at that instant, which was actually a really revolutionary concept at the time. But that was actually an idea that was built for mobile, if you think about it, right? Because if I'm on my phone and I'm watching the game and I just want to pull out my phone really quickly and see that, that's a much better user experience than going to .com and going through the process of pulling up the website. Maybe I have to log in. So they've continued to evolve, and then they just took it to the next level with wearables, where not only can I see where my pizza is in the process, but I could see exactly where the delivery guy is and when he's going to get to my house. So if I'm downstairs with 10 friends watching the game, I could just glance at my watch or get a notification on my watch and then go upstairs and meet him at the door. I no longer have to pay him, back to my the earlier conversation we were having around transactions. So I think that's a great example of using each channel and each touch point for a specific purpose that adds value to the overall consumer experience.
Great. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, so a client that we work with is Spotify. And can I just see, show of hands, how many Spotify users there are? And okay, so
I still got some SoundCloud folks out there.
Almost everybody, right?
I like SoundCloud too.
Yeah, SoundCloud's great. But so has anybody plugged their phone into their car while using Spotify? Okay, a few. And it works pretty good, right? So I think that for me, having been kind of a longtime Spotify user, did I like their web product or their desktop product to begin with? Absolutely. So in looking at what is the incremental value that they've been able to create for me as a consumer in terms of continually improving the user experience, it's really about making it easy to discover new music, to play music that I want to play, really wherever I want to play it, right? So not just when I'm at my my laptop, but when I'm on the go. They have kind of a new-ish mode where when you're running or exercising, it kicks into the running mode. Connecting with your car and making it completely seamless. They view the world in a very similar fashion to the way that I view the world, which is we're seeing increasing number of consumer touch points across mobile, wearables, ultimately connected TVs, and then your car, that are all bound together by kind of unique but kind of seamlessly tied together app experiences. And I think a company like Spotify, me as a consumer, as a fan of the brand, getting to work with them and see kind of what their omni-channel aspirations are has been really, really exciting.
And Spotify, I mean, to that example, you can even now in an Uber connect your Spotify to play through that car when you're in the Uber, right? I mean, that's a mobile-only experience that just couldn't have happened before. I mean, I guess you could have brought your CD in your cab and thrown it in there, but that would have been totally different, right? You're not going to carry around your CDs. Ryan, what's your answer there?
So I'll give you a handful.
Sure.
One that I discovered it not too long ago. I took my first vacation in 5 years. And,
Congrats.
Thanks. I went out to the North Fork and jumped around some of the vineyards, and I was out with a friend who was also in the area, and we went out to dinner, and they asked me if I heard of this app called Flinch. Does anybody know Flinch? Raise your hand. No? All right, this is going to be great. So Flinch is it's an app that so you download it, you basically scan your face, and then you're paired with a random stranger, and the goal is to make that stranger laugh. And if you laugh, you lose. Oh. It's hilarious. So there's an amazing opportunity.
I mean, great and terrible at this.
These ads popped up obviously in between rounds. I think I have 2,000 points if anyone wants to try to beat me. But the ads are getting pretty interesting. The prompt to enable Bluetooth connectivity as it relates to that publisher and that advertiser. It's pretty interesting to watch the advancement in their advertising. So definitely Flinch. Another hilarious one is kind of closer to our space, is L'Oreal's Makeup Genius, particularly if you're a guy and you want to see what you look like in drag. So it's this augmented reality, sort of a similar thing to Flinch, but you can sort of get inspired by all these different looks, and then hold up the camera or hold up the app, and it shows your makeup on your face, and it follows you around.
You could maybe put the makeup on through L'Oreal and make someone laugh through Flinch with that look there, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that'd be my tactic.
No wonder you're director of alliances.
Yeah, partnerships, that's what I do,
And I guess to close it out in a serious, closer to us in terms of comps, we're big fans of the brand ModCloth. Okay. Out in San Francisco, and their app is, I think it does a great job of blending in their user base, and they're known to, they're sort of anti, Photoshop and anti-models. They bring in the user contributed content as it relates to that product in a very community driven and classy way. So we think they did a great job. Great.
You guys all mentioned in a couple different ways things like the Apple Watch, wearables, multiple touch points. A couple questions on that. First and foremost, when we're thinking about touch points, can you be mobile only, right? Can you exist as a mobile only business without thinking about investing in a web strategy, investing in an email strategy? I don't particularly mean if you have all these different channels, do you silo your data? Of course, we all know that's not something you should be doing, but if you are mobile only, are you limited because you don't have data from users touching your brand in other places?
Well, it's back to what is mobile, right? I mean, everything is mobile today.
Yeah.
70% of emails are opened on mobile, so you could say email is mobile. So I think to answer your question is no. I think you need to be in all these channels. You might focus your customer interaction strategy and your monetization strategy through an app if your business dictates that based on what it is, who you are and what you're trying to do. But you're making a mistake if you have no mobile web presence and you're not collecting emails, because guess what? People all of a sudden stop using your app, and there's if they don't have push turned on, they're not coming into your app. It's harder to find them, and then you can try to go out and retarget them through paid media potentially. But there's, if you have their email address, it gives you a myriad of other ways to reach them, including through paid media. So I think you'd be potentially making a big mistake if you ignored a lot of these other channels.
Yeah, I'd almost kind of flip the question and ask, like, if you're a digital business, can you win without being heavily in mobile?
It's a question I meant to ask.
And I think it'd be tough to say yes. When you look at the stats, I think over 50% of the top 100 most valuable privately held tech companies, so like the unicorns, quote unquote, are either mobile first, mobile centric, or exclusively mobile. So I think that shows kind of the emphasis on mobile for the future of building a really strong business.
To sort of extend that into the brick and mortar perspective, mobile for us, particularly our stores, mobile touches at least, call it, 6 out of 10 transactions in some way. And when I look at traditional retail math, any customer that buys in a store, if they're touching multiple sales channels, so we define a sales channel, we have online, wholesale, and retail brick and mortar. So if they're touching multiple, they're anywhere from 5 to 7 times more valuable than a single channel shopper. So the halo effect and all the economies of scale get added when you add all the other stuff. When you add, even if you don't have the ability to get it yourself, you can buy it from a data standpoint. So if you don't have a powerful desktop experience and you're a mobile-first company, you can still share your data in a compliant way and get that additional insight, which could in turn give you that lift that we all talk about.
Can you give an example of that?
Being able to take, so you have a great mobile experience. Maybe it's a horrible desktop experience, but it might be a nice mobile web experience. If you're sort of mobile first, you might be in between. We are, even our creative brief process at Alexani, it starts with mobile. And when you look at the rigidness it took in the discipline it took to get to that process, when we saw a mistake made where mobile wasn't front and center, we shut down the ability to communicate through desktop. So you could not send an email from your Outlook, and that was just sort of it was more of a team thing as opposed to a company thing to just get in the habit. So to give you an example, being able to take mobile data and get it into, say, a data management platform and go out there and match and find users that are on mobile devices but have yet to have an experience that happen to look like your customers. Being able to only bid on opportunities to drive them to mobile was tremendous and was certainly bigger than just a mobile play for us. But I think the more important thing is to go the other way. So to be able to close the loop with unknown and known data. So going back this thing we've been talking about for, 10 years now, maybe 8 years. First-party data you own. Third-party data you buy. The glue in between, the truly unique partnerships and this thing we all chase called second-party data, particularly in retail. If we're partnering up with a wholesale retailer, like a department store to sell our products, a Bloomingdale's, a Nordstrom, or maybe even a smaller regional player, it's in their best interest to give us data, or at least put it into a place where we can compare it against our data, find out what the overlap is like. We can then reward for product discovery. We can reward for crossovers. So somebody discovers us at a Bloomingdale's, maybe we know that because we have the geolocation data of that device. Somehow we mapped it into a purchase based on Bloomingdale's data sharing, and they repeat purchased on alexdani.com. So why would we not give them credit for that? Why would we not, give them, additional co-op marketing dollars, or give them margin relief, or give them some sort of trade credit, give them call-outs with our direct-to-consumer business. So I think the whole idea of second-party data is going to be something we hear a lot more about in 2016, particularly as it relates to mobile data.
Sure. I mean, I think it's an interesting point, especially when you think about data platforms based on the conversation that was happening this morning with email, starting to take over as that unique identifier. You guys talked about ad blocking earlier, for example. That's certainly going to be a limitation. Since mobile's been around, the lack of cookies in mobile has certainly been a limitation when it comes to advertisers, certainly more publishers as well. I think a lot of people might make that argument that you can bypass that second-party data step, right? If you do have that really rich first-party data set, whether that's coming from web, email, mobile, what have you, right? Just go right to Facebook, right to Google for those acquisition campaigns. But it sounds like you guys might be in an interesting position because you do sell through affiliates. I'm curious if you guys, would agree with that, or if you think it's really only based on those retailers that do have that Alexani-like experience.
Yeah, we are a first-party data platform for mobile, and what makes mobile data so valuable, especially app data, is that there's so much friction in downloading an app, so you're weeding out the quality from the quantity. It's your most loyal and engaged users who are the ones that are generating this data. So there's a ton of rich signal. First-party data is always the best. The challenge with first-party data is that it doesn't scale well, right? It'll fatigue, tactics fatigue, segmentation strategies as you're successful, limited to first-party data also fatigue. The thing with third-party data is if you do not have the proper tools, it's very easy to say, well, third-party data doesn't work. Third-party data does work. It is the kind of sole reason my last company was so successful. It gives you the ability to learn things about your users based on things that they're doing completely outside of your app or your mobile web property. Second-party data is something that's really interesting. I know that there's a couple of the web-based data management platforms that we're really starting to push for this over the past couple of years. They've since been acquired, so the rhetoric around this stuff has kind of died down a little bit. But this is, we're seeing this actually on our platform, where if you have one app client over here and another app client over here, if they want to share data amongst them, they can. By default, data is not shared, but if they want to start to cross-pollinate data, to be able to use somebody else's first-party data as, you know, as a bit of like a third-party data source, that really creates that second-party data opportunity. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating this seed based on first-party data, you're building it out with second-party data, and then you're amplifying that one step further with third-party data. And the application of that, as we've seen on our platform, is to drive engagement, retention, and monetization. But as you start to also uncover things about your users based on what they do both inside the app as well as outside of the app, that should really be informing your user acquisition strategies as well, right? Because not all users are created equal, and what separates higher quality users from lower quality users is based on what they do within the app.
So I'm pause you on that, because from a marketer perspective, that's the holy grail, getting that data. But from a user perspective, that's terrifying, right? It's terrifying to think about the idea that I'm going to give Alex and I permission to use my data. They're going to go give it to Bloomingdale's in exchange for other information. Where's that line? How do you toe that line?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the framework you outlined is really interesting, and I think it's the second-party data piece in particular. And we actually have a lot of clients, to your point, Amy, that are explicitly concerned about that practice. And they want to know that we're not looking at what people who have other apps on the same handset are doing and then marrying their first-party data with other companies' data and going out and reselling it. It's a huge concern, and only more so over time. So it's exciting, and the potential of it is great, but obviously it requires, like in the context of a partnership where you want to work with Bloomingdale's, if you make you're Eli Tahari, I think, if I said that right, and you sell jackets at Bloomingdale's, and you want to share data with Bloomingdale's, that's great. And if you can leverage that partnership together to enhance both of your databases, that's fantastic. But it's a huge concern, I think, in mobile in general, because there are shady practices and shady players out there, and there's a reputation. A lot of that started in the web years ago with email and email acquisition programs and things like that. That there's it's a bit of a headwind in some cases for mobile marketers who are new to the space.
It's got to be opt-in, right? Like they have to opt into that data sharing. Data should be segregated by default, not co-opted by default.
Absolutely.
Yeah, even the big co-ops out there, there a lot of them exist. The old Abacus co-op, I think part of Epsilon now. The vendor-based co-ops are starting to pop up, particularly for mobile, for stitching. What we found is there's a way to keep the Chinese wall very clear when you're dealing with sort of the cross brand, again, the department store to brand direct. There's a lot of data that you can share from insight perspective only. So you want to marry two data sets together just to get reporting level information on overlap. So if we're doing a share non-PII, say we have 10% overlap with mobile devices or 10% overlap in cookie pools, and we look at timestamps, all that, and we double down on the next month's worth of direct response co-op, and that sell-through goes up, it's an even time of year, and overlap doesn't go up, we know it's working. So there's insight, but I think when you get to that line of PII, even with sort of semi-anonymous CRM type of data, right? Social CRM, for example, when you start to explore those discussions, it becomes very sensitive. We're a brand that likes to put the customer in the center of the business no matter what. So there's always somebody advocating for that customer, and oftentimes it's the customer themselves. It's the empty seat at the executive table at Alex and Ani everybody will point to, that's the customer, what would she say? So to be innovative and to be leading edge here, we feel you have to balance it out properly, and our take is, and I think the National Retail Federation's take as well, is you want to front load that information for the customer and teach them, educate them into the value. So the value exchange, not buried in a privacy policy, but as you centralize all these opportunities for preference management, not just on your site, but across the whole open web, how do you educate them in what they get? So maybe it's part of a loyalty program, and you only do it with your most loyal customers, right, who might be, to the point earlier, might be your bread and butter. Or maybe it's just something that you're testing and you're giving some sort of reward to get some data-driven results to then make a decision. As long as you're educating them and not burying it, we're fine with it.
Right, and I think to that point, I mean, it goes back to what you guys were saying in the beginning, giving customers that experience that they want, right? Making it worth it for them to opt into sharing that information, right? So I guess one of the last questions I want to ask you guys is how do you use that data to drive a relevant experience, particularly in mobile, right? If you're able to aggregate all the data, especially, that's great. But when you think specifically about mobile, how do you make it relevant for the consumer?
Yeah, I think for mobile, it's similar to web relevance in a lot of ways, but there's context now. There's where am I, what am I doing at that moment when you're trying to speak to me, and I think that's another area of like innovation opportunity going forward is with, for instance, semantic detection, being able to know if someone is driving in a car, riding a bicycle, on a treadmill, or sleeping at a given moment before you try to market to them or interrupt them. So I think the expectations are higher in mobile, but the upside is higher too. If you can actually enhance what they're doing based on where they are, based on what you know about them and their past experiences, and tie all that data together to add to whatever it is that they're doing at that moment, you've got an opportunity to build an even better and deeper relationship than you could otherwise. But if you get it wrong, I think the risks are also higher too, because people will turn you off faster and they'll be less likely to forgive you sooner. So.
Especially when you get into things like wearables, right? I mean,
yeah,
talk about
exactly.
it. You can't mess up that experience.
What's the point? And if you nail it, you really got it. People are going to talk about it. They're going to use it. They're going to show their friends. And now, obviously, with social, that gets out there faster than ever before. But yeah, and it's actually interesting. There's a customer of ours, another music streaming business, that does an amazing job of content personalization while you're inside the app when you're listening to music. It's almost as if they're inside your head. They know what you're going to want to listen to next. It's all about music discovery. And then in some focus groups they were doing, some of their loyal users made a comment like, it's interesting because when you send me marketing messages, this is not a current customer, by the way, this is a future customer. when you send me marketing messages, it's like you forgot who I was and you don't know who I am anymore, and you send me things that don't make any sense and I don't understand it. And it was like a huge disconnect. So creating that highly personalized, relevant experience in the moment to add to enhance what someone's doing, and then it's with the stakes being higher, you have to deliver on it all the time, everywhere, because you're only as good as that last interaction or message, right, and you can do a lot of damage quickly.
Makes sense.
So.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that there's a big difference between being an effective marketer and just being like a crazy stalker, right? And so with that, I think when you have like mobile messages, like push notifications, a lot of the stuff that you guys do really well, when you do that right, it feels like a natural extension of the app. It doesn't feel like this totally separate experience. Like maybe I got sidetracked in the middle of something and I left something in the shopping cart, and it was like, hey, come back in and complete the transaction. I mean, given where we sit in the ecosystem, it's really about simplifying the complex process of working with best in breed technology providers to be able to do all the things that you need to do as a mobile marketer, right? Unlike websites where getting access to a user's data is relatively easy from an implementation standpoint. Implementing and instrumenting an SDK can take weeks, if not a month, both in terms of development time and QA, and then waiting for the App Store to reapprove the latest version of the app, to users updating the app and getting it out to a meaningful part of the overall user base. So having kind of on-demand access to your data, which then provides you always-on access to the set of tools that map to whatever your set of challenges are, is kind of the first step that we think about. And then this goes back to one of the things I was saying earlier, which is in mobile, because the device is so personal, it really has to be user experience oriented. If it is disruptive, if it's not value add, if it doesn't provide the user with any kind of relevant information, don't do it. Don't do it, because it's only going to backfire.
So to that point, sorry to cut you off on that answer. We only have about 5 minutes left. I want to get to this before we have questions from you guys. In 3 sentences or less, if you're a publisher or an e-commerce company new to mobile, biggest piece of advice. Start with you, Ryan.
Biggest piece of advice for any retailer or e-commerce player is start with data first, because you have to have your data centralized across every single touch point that you have in order to develop an effective mobile strategy. And the reason being, if you're going to go back and prove what you said was going to happen actually happened, we call that a value assessment, which are high, medium, low. You've got to be able to measure it effectively. And without the data in one place, you can't measure it. Therefore, you can't justify additional improvements to it and so on.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, that's almost exactly what I was going to say, right?
You gave us pitch form. It was perfect.
Yeah, thank you for that, by the way. What a lot of people will do is they'll try to solve individual pain points in a very kind of reactive fashion, and then they wake up one day and their app is completely bloated. They have 18 different SDKs, their app is unstable, and they don't know kind of where to begin. So think about solving data challenges from the perspective of like building like long-term health, right? It's not going to be something that you see a huge impact with on day one, but over time it's going to make your lives much, much easier. And then on top of that, I'd say, obviously work with great partners like Appboy and Sailthrough.
We didn't pay him to say that, I swear.
Yeah, I mean, clearly data, knowing your customer, anticipating their needs is first and foremost, no question about it. Just to echo some of what we've been discussing earlier, I think have a strategy for mobile or apps, or if you're going to build an app, and have a reason to do it, not just to create another channel because someone said you should. Right. It should be additive. And then the third piece, this is something that we see every day, and what we really specialize in, frankly, is have an onboarding program, because people come into your app for one reason or another, and if they don't have a positive experience, and kind of, I call it the aha moment, if they don't get that aha moment within the first 2 or 3 sessions, sometimes one, it's very likely you're never going to see them again. So you got to onboard them in that initial experience, look at your data, know kind of what those 2 or 3 core features or things that they need to find or do right out of the gate are to get them hooked, get them in there right away, and if they don't find them, send them an email, send them a push, whatever it is, get them back in quickly, because then they're going to be gone.
Right, cross-channel, absolutely. Yep. All right, we have about 5 minutes. I told you guys I'd be looking for questions, so who's stepping up to the mic here to ask these guys some questions? Oh, there's got to be someone. There we go. Who's that guy?
I think you mentioned it earlier that the mobile is, what is mobile? How long do you think before we actually stop talking about mobile first and mobile only? How long before actually that is what it is, because we get rid of desktops? Because you're at the forefront, you're talking to the industry all the time. How long before we actually stop talking about that?
Can I give you a negative answer? I think that's what we're always talking about. Every single conference.
I think you guys
every single
I think
paper.
the industry as a whole, how long before the industry starts to actually adapt that? Because I think it's so far removed for so many people.
I think we're very close. I think that what you'll find is smaller brands, more agile brands, and I'm only giving you the retailer and e-commerce perspective. You'll start to see the market recognize the market share taken from the big boys, and they'll be forced to evolve. They'll be forced from not a digital transformation, not like a fancy let's do it the right way. They're going to be forced from a market share standpoint. So a lot of these top-down mandates will come when you have a strong digital leader at the top who can give mobile a seat in a boardroom. But if their comps are continually negative quarter over quarter, you're going to have these what do we do next moments where they bring in all the consultants and they say, you know what, take these 10 examples of companies that just completely destroyed your market share, and you have to do what they've done, and now you're trailing. So I think if we go another 12 to 18 months without drastic change at the industry level, you're going to start to see a completely new industry of consultants form to fix problems that were once not a non-issue for those that thrive in the desktop space.
Yeah, I'd also say like a lot of the rhetoric is just people trying to figure it out, right? I think one of the more interesting takes on all of it that I've read recently is Benedict Evans' post a couple months ago, where basically mobile's the center of everything, right? There's never been more devices shipped in the history of humankind that people use on a continual basis. They upgrade every 2-ish years or so. So it's mobile at the center of everything, and I think that's what's going to ultimately take shape because of the persistence that the device represents in our daily lives.
I don't want to be the contrarian, but I will. I think we're still a little ways away from what I see every day. I think it's front and center in everyone's minds, but I don't think it's front and center in how everyone's acting and organizing in their companies, to be honest with you. And I think people know what they need to do, but they're struggling with actually doing it. So I think we still have a ways to go, even though it's inevitable, in my opinion.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. We also have runners if that's easier. Make you guys exercise here.
A little bit of exercise, never hurt anyone. Hey guys, I loved hearing you guys talk a little bit about how centralizing data was really critical to thinking about your mobile strategy and what made sense for your individual brand. Do you have any specific recommendations for how to get kind of that mobile data, especially in-app versus site and then desktop, mobile site and desktop, into, say, one location like a Looker? Any specific tools or recommendations you might have that's worked well for you guys or your clients?
Sail through.
That's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So without plugging ourselves too hard, I mean, maybe we should talk after that. That's exactly what we do.
Okay, awesome.
To give you Alex and Ani's perspective, I go back to, what was that? Was it 2011? About 2011? 2012? 2012, we were out there and we were going pretty fast. I think we're on record as the fastest growing multi-channel retailer in the world, and that's a 5-year compound annual growth rate that hasn't been topped. And the digital piece of the business was the most significant. That was the e-commerce business that I started almost from scratch. So I go back to the initial, I came out of Silicon Valley, non-traditional background, saw a lot of these big companies get snapped up by, the Oracles, Salesforce, Adobes of the world, and I represented a handful of them as a banker, as a placement agent, raising money. But, putting them front and center as a small to mid-sized brand, that was sort of what we wanted to be. And when it came to, the evaluation period, we threw in an outlier, and that happened to be Sailthrough. And it was Sailthrough's ability to do something very simple at the time that nobody else could do. This was, going back a couple years. Personalized send times, it was huge for us because we have so many different types of customers. So that one little thing that absolutely did it for us back then allowed us to extend that strategy into not just our emails, but site-side content, app, going into this powerful ecosystem of where we have 37 or so vendors, data in one place. So I think it's going beyond looking at CRM and email details and email behavior and social CRM in one place. It's extending a lot more than that plus site and that plus marketing. So we found that, and we continue and have continued to build upon it. So if that's any piece of advice as it relates to current strategy, stick with it. Absolutely, it hasn't changed much for us.
Thank you. And with that, we're actually going to have to wrap, but round of applause for everyone. That was great. Appreciate it. To all three of you, I appreciate it quite a bit.